Hi, and welcome to Makin Music. My name is Dan Aroney, and I'll be your host for the next half hour. This week's show is sponsored by Guitar Showcase in San Jose, California. This week we have a very special guest. I would love to introduce to you Tiran Porter. Tiran,
hello, Dan.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
It is great to have you here this week. Tiran was the bass player for the Doobie Brothers from 1971 to 1980, from 1987 to 1992. He played on 10 of the Doobie Brother albums.
It was a dubious distinction.
And also, you've been on over 40 albums with various artists as well since then. And most currently, you're playing with the White Album Ensemble band, or White Album Ensemble, I should say. But let's go back to the beginning. Now, are you from the Bay Area originally?
No, I grew up in Los Angeles. Spent most of my formative years down there, and I moved up here when I joined the Doobies in 1971.
Now, what was that? When did you start playing? And did you start playing bass?
No, I started playing guitar probably at the age of around 14 or 15. And I couldn't teach myself fast enough how to play guitar, so I started playing bass lines on the bottom four strings, and the other male vocalist in the band I was in at the time said, you know, you ought to just get a bass. You know, you're already playing it.
Now, did you ever take lessons?
No.
You didn't? This is just self-taught?
I taught myself how to play by playing along with Beatle albums.
Oh, what a great full circle that is.
Yes.
So when did you move to the Bay Area?
In 1971.
Now, but let's go back to LA, I'm sorry, your first band.
First band I was in was a bunch of high school friends of mine and I, called the Greenwich Mean Time. And we played high school functions and parties until one day in 1966 when we played what was called a hootenanny back then at a place called the House of the Rising Sun in Redondo Beach. And if I hadn't met the guys in another band that played that hoot that night, I would never have been in the Doobies.
Now, is this band local to here, or were they from LA as well?
No, they were local to here. They were from the San Jose area, and they called themselves the Slippery Rock String Band. They were a bluegrass band.
Uh-huh. And anyone in particular in the band that you met?
All four of them. Chuck Mccabe, Mike Mindell, Bob Harvey, and what was the guitarist's name? Lee Chaney.
Now, did you move up here then after that?
No, it took another 6 years before I moved up here.
And so when you did, this is when you got together with Chuck Mccabe?
No, I got together with Chuck Mccabe while I was still in LA. They stayed down there for quite a number of years.
So how did now give me the connection then to the Doobie Brothers?
Well, Mike Mindell, the violin player with the Slippery Rock String Band, when their band broke up and my band broke up, we merged and became a rock band called the Sixpenny Opera. And we went through various incarnations of that, and when the last one broke up, Mike Mindell moved back up to San Jose. And about a year later, he called me and said, Ty, you got to come up here and jam. I met this great guitar player named Pat Simmons. You got to come up. So I did, and that was probably around late '69, early '70.
But they weren't the Doobie Brothers yet.
It was a band called Scratch, and we just played as a trio around the South Bay area here. And during that time, we met what at the time was the nucleus of the Doobie Brothers, Tom Johnston, John Hartman, and Dave Sjogren.
So they were all living in San Jose at the time. But Dave Sjogren was playing bass.
Yeah.
So you came up. Now, how did Dave go out and you come in?
Hold on.
Okay.
They took Pat out of our band, and
they stole Pat from you.
So I went back to LA, put another couple of bands together. They got signed to Warner Brothers, made an album, did a tour, both of which failed miserably. At the end of that time, Dave got disillusioned and left. I was the only other bass player they knew that sang. So Pat called me up in LA and said, "Come on up."
And that was where it started. Now, did they already have an album out, or did
they had one album out?
And you started in '71 then?
Yeah.
Is that right?
And right about the same time that they were starting to cut the album, which eventually became Toulouse Street.
Mm-hmm. So after that, and I mean that wasn't as mainstream as some of the others that I think. What was after Toulouse Street?
After Toulouse Street was The Captain and Me.
And that's the one I think that really a lot of people, I mean, I certainly have it in my collection of albums.
There were a couple of hits off of Toulouse Street. Listen to the Music was on that album.
Okay.
Jesus is Just All Right. But the next one sort of put us over the top. And that had China Grove, Long Train Runnin', and South Sydney Midnight Lady.
Oh, yeah, which are great songs. That's one of my favorites, of course. It's just a great slow shuffled almost type of song. Yeah. So, and then you've gone after that. You went on to do what they did a total of 8 albums during. Now, why? And so, you know, and you guys were playing absolutely everything. I mean, you played in Saturday Night Live. You've played Johnny Carson show, I think.
No, we did that came later. We did Midnight Special in the '70s, Don Kirshner's rock concert, Dick Clark's Rockin' New Year's Eve. Saturday Night Live, but we didn't do the late night shows until we reformed in the '80s.
And you guys did Saturday Night Live. Now, was it as crazy and wild as everyone says it is?
Yeah,
that you
John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd were there.
Were they?
Of course it was.
Now, that must have been something to see.
Yeah, it was. I can't tell you about it.
Not on TV anyway.
No.
And so you went on to do 8 albums with them, and but you also, like I say, you did Johnny Carson later on. Mm-hmm. Now, how did that come about?
After I left the Doobies the first time, our producer Ted Templeman put me in touch with Nicolette Larson, and he put me into her band to do an album, and to promote that album, we did a short tour in California. And we did The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson.
Oh, so that's when you were with Nicolette, not with the Doobies. Oh, how cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I got to do Carson, but not with the Doobies.
Oh, so you left after '87.
No, I left after 1980.
Okay, 80, I'm sorry.
And I spent the next 6.5 years away from the band, and then there came a reformation, and they drugged me back in.
But that was for the tour. They did, I think, 6 locations, and that was the big band. They brought everyone
the Dubious
back
big band.
Now, I think we have a tape that we're going to watch of this, and this was, and I got to tell you, my wife and I, we were at that show. It was at the Shoreline Amphitheater in, I think, 1987, and this was one of the 6 reunion concerts that you guys did. And I always want to say a quick hi to Sid Thompson and his wife, wonderful wife, Helen. We were up in the lawn for that concert. So I think we have a tape. We're going to run it of that you guys playing that night. That was a great tape. And now you did 6 shows from the big band. Now, how many guys were playing in that?
Let's see, 4 drummers, 4 guitar players, 2 keyboard players, a percussionist, and 1 bassist.
And then how many? And you guys played 6. Where'd
shows.
You play at?
San Diego, Hollywood, Las Vegas, Shoreline Amphitheater here in the Bay Area, Portland, Oregon, and Tacoma, Washington.
Cool. Now we're going to go back. We're going to actually go back now. We're going to take a little trip back because we have a couple pictures of you that we found in the archives.
The Wayback Machine.
And we want to run a picture of you with your very first bass. Let's see if we can bring this up on the screen right now. Can you describe
back when
this
I
to
was
us?
much younger and way thinner.
Describe that a little bit to us, if you would.
That's a Japanese Taiko Bass, which is the first bass I ever owned, and I didn't even know how to tune it for the first couple of years I was playing.
And how old were you in this picture?
About 14 or 15.
And how about an amp? What did you have?
I was playing through a Silvertone amp, the kind that has a speaker cabinet that the amp head tucks into the back of.
And this was the band, this was the first band that you played
the Greenwich
with?
Mean Times.
The Greenwich Mean Time. Now we have another picture as well that we're going to bring up, and this was the picture with you and Chuck Mccabe. Mm-hmm. Now tell us about this.
That's in Echo Park in Los Angeles, probably in 1970. And the three of us were 3/4 of a band called Phoenix. And we recorded an album for ABC Paramount, which went absolutely nowhere. And the band broke up, and I went on to another couple of bands, one of which was Scratch. But that picture was taken on an afternoon in Echo Park when we were feeling no pain, shall we say.
And that's a great shot. Now, Chuck Mccabe, of course, is a local guy, and he's won several acoustic guitar competitions, I know.
So and songwriting competitions.
Yeah, so he is very, very well known in the Bay Area as just a terrific mandolin player, guitar player.
Banjo player, too.
Banjo player, too, yeah. So that's a...
And Charles, if you're watching, hi there.
Yeah, hi Chuck. So let's go, let's move on with the second time. Now, you came back to the Doobie Brothers. You quit the band in 1987.
No, 1980.
80, excuse me. And then you came back in 87 again, and they did the reunion tour.
And at that time, the management got the idea of putting the original band back together, the band that had cut Toulouse Street. Mm-hmm. So they did that, and I sort of reluctantly went back because I wasn't really keen on going back with the band. Because I just sort of looked at it and went, well, is it going to change or is it not? Because I was doing a whole bunch of other stuff. I was in like 3 or 4 different bands and was doing production and a lot of studio sessions. And so I voiced my concerns to Simmons, and he sort of poo-pooed it and went, oh, no, you'll have a good time. So I went back into it and spent the next 5 years doing that, and went back out on the road again, discovered that it was the same stuff, different decade.
But you guys just do tons of gigs. I mean, no one that's ever been on the road will ever understand what you guys go through on a day-to-day basis and being out on the road. I mean, I think you discussed is you're out on the road 2 or 3 months at a time, and then back for only a couple weeks and then right back out.
Yep.
And, I mean, just describe that a little bit. I just, you know, for us, people who have never been there and never gone through that, just a little bit about being on the road.
Imagine being in a hotel room, a different hotel room every night, a different stage every day, different faces every day, except for your band mates and your road crew. And while it might all sound romantic and everything, it gets a little old.
So now you're back, and you stayed with them until 1992. And then quit again. Now you're just you're in the Bay Area now. You're lock stock. You're a Santa Cruz mountain man now for the last 30 years, I guess.
Yeah, well, 32 actually.
Yeah,
it'll be my 32nd year in the Santa Cruz Mountains this year.
Yeah, what a great place to live.
Yeah, I love it. It affords me some degree of anonymity.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about gear, because this is a thing that all of us just love talking about. I know you play fretless. This has been
the last 2 gigs I did with the Doobies were the first 2 gigs I ever played fretless
on. And of course, the one with the tape we just saw when you were doing the reunion, you were playing a Kubicki X Factor, and which was fretted, I'll say, yeah. And but now you've gone. Now, what made you change from fretted instrument to fretless?
I noticed in the years I was playing with Mike McDonald that whenever I'd play in first position, it was never in tune. It was never perfectly in tune. If you're playing along with somebody whose left hand is playing a bass line on the piano, you can really hear if it's not in tune because of the beating between the notes that are supposed to be in unison, but they're not. So I have really good relative pitch, and I just decided, if there's no frets in the way, I can play in tune.
Now let's talk a little bit about your guitar, your basses here. Now, I just want to say I have a group of customers at Guitar Showcase, and they love making guitars. So this is going to be a real treat for them to see another person like yourself that just loves taking instruments and putting them together, as we call Frankensteins.
After a while, I noticed that most production fretlesses didn't really suit me. Mm-hmm. They didn't suit me the way they felt. They didn't suit me the way they sounded. So knowing that there are a bunch of companies in the States that make different parts, I started calling around. I got necks from all parts in Texas, pickups from Bartolini here in the Bay Area, bodies from Warmouth up in Washington, and bridges from Fender, tuners from Schaller or other manufacturers, and just started putting together a series of Frankensteins. There are 8 of them.
You have 8 Frankensteins right now. Now I see on the headstock it's F4.
Yeah, this is Frankenstein 4.
And this is F6 for Frankenstein
6.
Well, let's take this out and describe this a little bit to me of what you've done with F4.
Frank 4 has a mahogany body, mahogany back, and a koa top. And that was made by Warmouth. And the neck is a maple neck with a ebony fingerboard, which I like a lot for fretless. Flat wound strings, Schaller.
Now, who do you use for flat wound strings? Is there a particular brand?
Diodario.
Okay.
Diodario.
Well, they're going to love to hear that.
Yes, I love them. Would you guys please make me a 6-string flat wound set?
After you hear that, I want you to take note of that.
And it's got Bartolini pickups and electronics. And I use this primarily in the band I'm playing with right now to replicate the Paul McCartney bass sound.
Okay.
Because I had a Rickenbacker, but it wasn't loud enough and or clear enough to articulate cutting through an 8-piece rock band. So
now, is this active circuitry or passive circuitry?
This is active circuitry.
Okay.
And these Bartolini humbuckers replicate the sound of McCartney's Hofner and his Rickenbacker, but they're louder and they have more high end, and they'll cut through a loud rock band.
Okay. That's and that's impressive. I mean, you've done impressive work with this.
Well,
now let's take a look at the other.
I just knew what I wanted.
Now I like the strap too. You want to describe the strap? Now I love.
Oh, the strap. Because the bass is heavy, I wanted to have something that would go over my shoulder and not cut into my shoulder. So I got a series of these about maybe 8 years ago and bought up every one I could, because of course they don't make them anymore.
I know. I don't see anything quite that. It's like a 4-inch or. Now I like this here. Now let's see if we can get a look at this right here.
This says, "I'm an endangered species." And if you know anything about musicians or music these days,
or bass players,
or bass players, that's a truism.
That is deep. Now let's talk about Frankenstein 6.
Frankenstein 6. I wanted to get a maple necked fretless because I didn't have one, and I got after Warmouth to make me a maple fretless, and they were a little reluctant to do it, and I don't know why. They wouldn't tell me, but I insisted.
And this looks like bird's eye maple.
Yeah, it's bird's eye.
Uh-huh.
I insisted, and also paid a little extra money for my insistence. And the body is Corina. You remember the old Flying V's and
yes. In 1980,
Explorers?
well, they originally in 1950s and the late 50s, and then again they did a remake in 1982. They're very sought after pieces.
Yeah, well, they're made out of Corina.
Corina wood, that's correct.
And so I wanted to have a bass that was made out of Corina.
And I hear this is a poisonous wood. I'm not sure it is, but you can't get splinters. It's actually, I don't know if this is true or not, but I heard that it's actually a poisonous wood to work with.
Really?
So that's why you don't see a lot of makers using this, because if you get splinters, I think it's... we'll have to look into that one.
Well, if I ever want to expire on stage, I'll do a Pete Townsend, break it, and
then splinter my finger. So again, I see you're using Bartolini's and a Fender-style bridge on this. And is this active as well?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the one that you're using with the band right now.
I'm using both these basses with the band.
And this is primarily for more doing the Beatles stuff. Mm-hmm. Now you said you have other basses. I know you didn't bring those along, and those are primarily for when you're doing other studio work for certain stuff.
Yeah, I have 5 and 6 string fretlesses.
Mm-hmm.
And
what do you use the 6 string fretless
The 6-string fretless I use for studio sessions and with a band I play with called Storm and Norman and the Cyclones.
Oh, great, yeah. And I happened to see them when you were playing at the Arts and Wine Festival in Capitola, which is a fun venue. So.
Yeah, we used to do that. I think we did it every year for 4 years. But they haven't hired us back in the last 2. And I don't know why.
Well, you were great.
I guess maybe we were too loud.
But how long have you been playing on and off with Storm and Norman?
17 years.
Oh, is that right? Wow. Now that's impressive. Now let's start. Let's talk. Now also you have an endorsement with, I think, this company Euphonics.
Euphonic Audio.
Now I think we have a picture of that of you on their endorsement thing. Let's see if we can bring that picture up of the Euphonics thing. There we go, right there. Let's talk. Tell us a little bit about that company.
They're a company out of New Jersey that makes certain bass-oriented speaker cabinets, and I first tried them out probably 1996 or 95 or 96, and I was really impressed with how such a small cabinet could get such low resonance.
Now, are these lightweight cabinets or heavy?
They're very light. Their single 10 cabinet weighs 39 pounds, and I can carry it with one hand.
Which is great for bass players. They always are, ever since the old SVT days, of where you need a roadie to take these around. And
don't need a roadie with euphonic audio cabinets, except for maybe their 310 cabinet. That stands about this tall.
And I know sometimes, occasionally, you play Accagroove as well, which is a local company out of Cupertino, and you use that for certain.
And they're even lighter.
And now you're using the euphonics for the Beatle stuff. Now tell us about what kind of amps you're using.
I'm using a number of different preamps with Carvin power amps. I like Carvins because they're easily accessible. You can get them pretty much any time from the Carvin Corporation. And I'm using a number of different preamps. Right now I'm using a Fender tube bass preamp and yes, tubes, more tubes. Oh, emulating Homer Simpson.
Right.
I'm using a Fender tube bass preamp and an Ampeg tube bass preamp in conjunction with one another, and running the Ampeg into mid-range friendly speakers, and running the Fender, which has a real creamy low end, into low-end friendly speakers, so that they produce this really complex waveform that sounds great at any distance.
Now let's talk. Now let's move on to with the White Album Ensemble. Now this is something that you guys started 2 or 3 years ago.
4 years ago.
4 years now it's been. And I know I got to tell you that my wife and I and my kids. I have a 12 and 10-year-old who play drums, and they have become absolutely avid Beatle fans since we went to see the Rubber Soul Revolver, which was about 1.5 years ago. And then in this last year, we went and saw Magical Mystery Tour and Sgt. Pepper's. And then this last show, just this last week, was Let It Be and Abbey Road, which was 2 sold-out performances at the Rio. And it was impressive. I mean, what a great combination of we have a picture, I think, that we'd like to bring up on the screen right now. And can you describe this to us?
Yeah, well, we reproduced the Abbey Road cover live in Santa Cruz. That's not done with computer. That's actually a street in Santa Cruz that looks almost exactly like Abbey Road. It's a little wider.
Now, where is this in Santa Cruz?
Near the corner of Lincoln and Cedar, I believe.
I got to go get a picture there. Now, we have the band members as well.
Yeah.
Do you want to bring a picture up, and then you can tell us about the boys in the band?
Well, right next to me on my left, there's Bob Bliss, who plays keyboards and guitar.
And who did they play? Can you tell us who they played with? Who they played with? Some of the.
Bob played with Joe Sciarrino Band, and is also a tech at the Emu Corporation. And next to him, over his left shoulder, is Dale Ackerman, who also plays keyboards and guitar and trumpet. And he's played with a number of bands. As a matter of fact, he and the person to his left but in front, Richard Bryant, both played in the Doobies with me during the last couple of years I was with the Doobies.
And then who else? Let's go back to the picture. We're not done. Bring
that
that picture back.
Thank you.
And then the rest of the band guy.
Michael Doherty over Richard's shoulder plays drums. Richard Bryant here in front does the Paul McCartney vocals. Right next to him is Jason Schimmel, who plays guitar.
Now he is a teacher as well in Santa Cruz.
Yeah.
Is that correct? He's at one of the
More Music.
More Music over there. Yeah.
And he and Dale both do lessons at More Music. Over Jason's shoulder is Alan Haidt, who's a local dentist in Santa Cruz, but also plays with a band called the Roadhogs. And he does the John Lennon vocals. And then, last but not least, is Ken Kraft on vocals and lead guitar, who played with the band Snail in Santa Cruz for a lot of years.
Okay. Well, tell us a little bit more about the band and what's happening.
We were formed back in, 4 years ago on an idea by a luthier over there named Rick Mccabe. He called me and Ken and Dale up and said, "How would you guys like to throw together a band of friends of yours and play the Beatles' White Album live. And we went, nice idea. I think we could work that. So we went out and sought out as many other musicians as we could find that were talented enough and like-minded enough to want to do the project. And it worked.
And when did you start? What was the first gig?
We did the White Album.
And when did you start with that?
That was 2003. 2002, excuse me.
And where did you play? What are some of the venues you were?
We did the Rio Theater in Santa Cruz, the Mello Center in Watsonville, the Sunset Center in Carmel. Where's it? Villa Montalvo? Villa Montalvo, the carriage house at Villa Montalvo.
And then after that, of course, did you do it in progression after that of how the Beatles albums went?
Yeah.
So
well, not really. No, we went out of order. First, we did the White Album, which was their third to last album. Then we went back a couple of albums and did Rubber Soul and Revolver. Yeah. Then we went forward and did Sgt. Pepper and Magical Mystery Tour.
Now, I know we're coming up at the end of our show, but you are playing at the Civic Auditorium coming up
on June 3rd.
Okay, and you're going to be playing with the
Santa Cruz Symphony.
And what are you going to be doing?
Just a bunch of Beatles songs that have an orchestra.
So you are going to just be all over the map as far as the...
No specific albums.
Yeah. Now, before we leave, I just want to... It's always a fun thing, because I always like to hear what people are playing. What is your favorite non-Doobie Brother album of all times that you really like? And everyone would love to hear that.
You're going to think I'm really weird, but it's Art Garfunkel's album called Watermark from 1976. 30 years ago. Ooh.
And how about the favorite Doobie album while we're on it?
That would be the last one I did during my first tenure with the band, One Step Closer.
And just as we go, and I always have to ask this because it's always a fun thing, just your favorite movie. And I know this, we're getting away from everything. You can't go there.
I can't go there. There's too many good ones.
Anyway, I want to thank you for joining us. I know this has been, to put 40 years of